Good morning, Loveland. I'm Mike Meldon, and this is your Loveland Weekly Update. Today's show is special, not only because we have the unofficial high school update, but we also have the Loveland Intermediate School update as well. So make sure you stay tuned. It's a little bit different today. It's just going to be you and I. And we're going to talk about a subject, or I'm going to be talking about a subject that I'm really interested in, and that's Cincinnati history. I haven't always been interested in Cincinnati history, but when I was working on my master's degree, I ended up taking a few courses on Cincinnati history with a professor named Paul Simon at Xavier University. And he made class fun and interesting, and he would take us on these tours. It made you feel like a VIP in Cincinnati. We got to go on the skywalk behind the hands of the clock at Union Terminal. We got to take a tour of the Red Stadium. We got to go in the subway that's underground Cincinnati streets. And so he really, in every corner that we took throughout the city, he had something to point out. And showed me that Cincinnati history is all around us. So I'd like to dedicate this episode to Dr. Simon. Even though I'm sure he doesn't remember me, he made a major impact. So before we get started, I would like to point out that we are going to cover many aspects of Loveland history, but I thought it would be fitting to start with Cincinnati. And I'm going to go through 5 main points that I think are interesting that you may have heard or may not have heard, and go through each one briefly because I think they're really cool things that make Cincinnati unique. The first one is more geography than history, actually. And that is something that I learned recently about Cincinnati. And that is that at one point, before the continent shifted, that the land we are on now was actually below the equator, was under a shallow sea, 100 to 200 feet, and was actually tropical climate. And that's why the fossils that we find are from about 450 million years old. And the ones that we find are mainly corals or what look like seashells and those types of things. So I found that very interesting. But like I said, this is more of about a human history. Now let's start with number 2. The second interesting thing about Cincinnati history is something called the Cincinnati tablet. And I hadn't heard about this tablet until about 10 years ago, and I actually stumbled across it because it was an album cover and an album name, and so I dug in to see if it was real, and it was. So the Cincinnati tablet was actually found in 1841, when sadly they were knocking down Indian or Native American burial mounds down in downtown Cincinnati. It was actually on the corner of Mound Street and 5th Street. And today there's a UPS facility just west of 71. So they were bulldozing these mounds, essentially. And, of course, there's going to be artifacts in there. And one of the artifacts was called the Cincinnati tablet. And it's just a stone. It's not real big. That has symbols on it, animal-like symbols. It's actually pretty abstract. And it's not the only one of its type to be found. They found, I think, 11 of them altogether that were very similar in Kentucky, Indiana, and maybe Tennessee, but don't quote me on that. But it's the most significant archaeological find in downtown Cincinnati. It's now housed at the Art Museum, the Cincinnati Art Museum, so you can check it out. I never actually have. But the cool part of it is that they don't know what it's for. Really interesting looking. I just think the mystery of it is really cool. But they do believe that it could have been used as like a stamp because they found red residue on it that could have been used as like a stamp for pottery. But they also see tool markings on it too, where it could have been used as a stamp on a human and then made into a tattoo. So it might have been actually the outline of a tattoo that people wore maybe for ceremonies or this and that. Another notable feature of the Cincinnati area is its numerous mounds. These mounds are earthen structures that were built by various prehistoric cultures in the region. Mostly think Adena, which were ancestors of probably the Shawnee, the Miami, the Delaware. But no one knows exactly for sure. But these mounds were used for a variety of purposes, including burial sites, ceremonial centers, and platforms for building, so infrastructure sometimes. I gained a new respect for these mounds when I visited Fort Ancient years ago with the current chief of the Eastern Shawnee tribe, Glenda Wallace. She had come up from Oklahoma with a full agenda, but one of the things she was working on was protecting her ancient burial and ceremonial sites of her ancestors. A lot of these sites in Ohio and Indiana that are still intact are on private property. And in many cases, the property owners cut up the mounds and sell what they find on eBay. It's really sad and it's just disrespectful. So working with her, seeing her connection, what she was working towards actually, made me more fond and more, I guess, protective of what we have here in Cincinnati, this history that could be lost if we don't protect it. And now for my third fact or interesting fact about Cincinnati, it's Tecumseh. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the name, may not be real familiar with who he was or what he did, and may not know that he's from here. Tecumseh's from actually Xenia, which is not far from here, right up north Cincinnati along the Little Miami River. Tecumseh was born during a comet, and that's actually where he got his name. The name Tecumseh means shooting star or flaming comet. And he was born in 1768. As Tecumseh grew up, more and more settlers started to arrive in this area, and tensions began to rise. The settlers wanted land for farming and homes. They wanted to clear it out, while the Shawnee saw the land as sacred and essential to their way of life. Tecumseh watched his people as they were pushed further and further back, as they were forced to give up their land and their homes. He knew that something had to be done to protect his people and their way of life. In 1791, Tecumseh and his brother joined the group of warriors led by the Shawnee chief Blue Jacket in a battle against the American army. The battle, known as the Battle of Wabash, was a devastating defeat for the Shawnee and their allies. However, Tecumseh and Tenskwatawa survived and continued to fight for their people. Over the next several years, Tecumseh worked tirelessly to unite the different tribes of the area against the encroaching settlers. This is probably what he's most famous for. He wanted people to drop their tribal identities and differences that they had and said, listen, we need to work together. We need to be a united front against this incursion. And if we don't, we're going to pay the price. He traveled extensively, meeting with other tribal leaders and urging them to join together to defend their land and their people. In 1808, Tecumseh and Tenskwatawa founded a village called Prophetstown, which became a gathering place for Native American tribes from across the region. They continued to urge other tribes to join them in their fight against the settlers. However, their efforts were ultimately unsuccessful. In 1811, the American army attacked Prophetstown, destroying the village and killing many of its inhabitants. Tecumseh himself was not present at the time of the attack, but he continued to fight for his people until his death in the Battle of the Thames in 1813, which was a battle actually up in Ontario, Canada, during the War of 1812. His legacy lives on as a symbol of resistance and courage in the face of oppression. His fight against the invading settlers remains a poignant reminder of the importance of preserving cultural heritage and protecting the land for future generations. Now, I spoke before about meeting the chief of the Eastern Shawnee. We were working together on a couple different projects. I actually went down to Oklahoma with some teachers, and she would come up here with some teachers. And in one of the projects that really I was working on was we wanted to lobby the people in the state, each of our states, them in Oklahoma and us in Ohio, to change the teaching standards. Because in Ohio, we teach about the Native Americans until they leave. And it's almost like they disappeared. The Indian Removal Act and this and that. And in Oklahoma, they only learn about the history of once they arrived in Oklahoma and thereafter. And so there's a disconnect. This is their homeland, obviously, and the people in Oklahoma don't know much about it. And in Ohio, where we learn about the Native Americans and, what kind of houses they lived in and this and that, we don't learn about what happened to them after they left and moved to Oklahoma and their Trail of Tears. So I worked with her on trying to get those changes in schools. So far, it hasn't come to much, but hopefully one day we can get those curriculum changes done. Now, there's a lot of history here that we're missing, and I understand that, and I get that, and I don't want to disrespect the Indian removal, the devastation of that. But here, I'm just here to give a few interesting points about early Cincinnati history. So moving forward, I want to talk about the next interesting point, which is the settlement of Cincinnati and the name Los Santoville. After the English colonies won their independence from England in 1776, more settlers headed west, and Kentucky was a very popular destination. Not long after, though, the land north of the Ohio River would become very sought after. The land surrounding Cincinnati was the frontier, full of potential but fraught with danger. And it was here that two men, George Washington and John Cleves Symmes, played pivotal roles in shaping the region's destiny. George Washington, the father of our country, was a visionary leader who saw the potential of the Ohio River Valley early on. In 1770, he wrote a letter to a friend saying, "No colony in America was ever settled under such favorable auspices as that which had just commenced at the Muskingum." John Cleves Symmes, whom both the city of Cleves and Symmes Township are named after, was a New Jersey lawyer and also believed in the region's potential. In 1788, he bought over 300,000 acres of land from Congress, with the goal of establishing a new colony in the West. This land was known as the Symmes Purchase or the Miami Purchase, and it covered the area of land from the Little Miami to the Great Miami River. The sale of the land was controversial, though, and with some arguing that Congress had no right to sell land that was already occupied by Native Americans, it still moved forward. The land later became Hamilton, Butler, and Warren counties. Symmes sold 10,000 acres to a man named Stites and 800 acres to Matthias Denman. In November 1788, Stites and his group established Columbia, Tusculum, the first settlement at the current location of the Lunken Airport, and Symmes created the town of North Bend in February 1789, right next to Cleves. On September 22nd, 1788, Denman, Colonel Robert Patterson, and John Filson scouted the future Cincinnati site. Filson conducted a brief survey before he disappeared, likely due to an Indian attack. But before his disappearance, Filson did contribute the name of the town, Los Santoville. And this is the cool part, I think. Los Santoville. L stands for Licking River. OS is Latin for the word mouth. Anti is the Greek word for opposite. And ville is the French for town. So Cincinnati's first name, Los Santoville, is the town across from the mouth of the Licking River. This name would only last 2 years because it just was, I forget the term they used, but it was just blah. So they moved on, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. As more and more settlers arrived in Los Santoville after 1788, they began the process of establishing a new colony, but it wasn't easy. The land was thick with forests, and they had to carve out a living from scratch. Adding to the difficulties, the settlers faced threats from the Native Americans, who we just discussed, who understandably saw the encroachment on their land as a threat to their way of life. In 1791, a group of Native Americans led by Chief Little Turtle attacked Symmes' settlement, killing several settlers. As settlers continued to arrive, the need for protection became clearer. So in 1789, General Josias Hamar ordered the construction of a fort on the site of the present-day Cincinnati. This fort would become known as Fort Washington. Its purpose was to provide protection to the settlers from Native American attacks and to serve as a base for military operations in the region. Now, in 1790, the town was named the county seat of Hamilton County by Arthur St. Clair, and he was the new Northwest Territory governor. St. Clair renamed Los Santoville, bestowing upon the growing settlement the name of Cincinnati. Here's where some different stories come in. And I've heard several different reasons for the name Cincinnati. They all go back to the basic thing. So let's just get to the basics of it right now. And the basics was they were named after Cincinnatus, right? Cincinnatus was a 5th century BC Roman soldier, and he was a hero. And after leading the Roman Republic's army to victory over invaders, he denied his rewards. He didn't want them. He returned to his farm where he lived out the remainder of his days. He didn't want to become an emperor. He didn't want to take the rewards. He just thought that he was doing his virtue, his civic virtue. So a couple stories come out of this. We know that Cincinnati is named after Cincinnatus, but is it through George Washington or is it through the Order of the Cincinnati? These two stories go like this. The first one is that the Order of Cincinnati was a growing organization of Revolutionary War veterans that kind of wanted to keep, like a VFW today. They would get together and relive stories of war and wanted to keep their story alive. And it was a popular organization of the day. And so some say that St. Clair got the name from the organization. Other stories that I heard, and I tend to lean more this way, and I could be wrong, but we had Fort Washington, and a lot of cities around the country were naming themselves Washington. And George Washington himself was known as the modern-day Cincinnatus. I believe that the people of Cincinnati, or Los Santoville at the time, and St. Clair, were naming it in respect to Washington. Because, like I said, that seemed to be the trend at the time. And George Washington was known as the modern-day Cincinnatus because he did exactly what the hero in ancient Rome did. He fought was a hero in war and went and served his country. And then George Washington could have remained president for life. He could have been essentially the king of America if he wanted to. And yet he wanted to return to his farm. And people saw, the likeness there and compared him, and his name was the modern-day Cincinnatus. So I tend to think that Cincinnati's named after Washington, not so much the organization, but very good chance I'm wrong. Also, final fact here, and this goes with it. If you go down to the banks and you take a look at the statue of Cincinnatus, it's telling us a story. And what you can see is this man in Roman soldier garb, but in one hand, he has a fascist he's handing out. And a fascist is an axe wrapped in sticks, and it stands for power and authority. And he's handing it out, like he's handing it back to the people, which is the story, right? He doesn't want to take this power and authority. He wants to go back to his farm. And so the statue, in his other hand, has a plow, insinuating or showing that what he really wants, he doesn't want the power and authority. He wants to go back to his plow, back to his farm. And so I look at it, like I said, I see this Cincinnati story. Either way, it goes back to him. And so the middle ground, whether it's through Washington himself or through the order that it's actually named after, I guess it doesn't mean as much, because the basis story of being civically minded, wanting to give what you got but not take, I think is really what you're supposed to get out of it, and what they wanted people to see when they saw the name Cincinnati.
Hi, my name is Hank, and I'm here with
Kane, Bracken,
and Caleb. And today we are going to be talking about our weekly update at Loveland Intermediate School.
So Kane, what's the Hope Squad doing this week?
This week we have Hope Week, where therapy dogs will be coming in on Monday. Tuesday we'll be spreading positivity with clothespins. Wednesday it was Red and White Day for the 5th and 6th grade. Thursday there's an inflatable obstacle course outside that kids can play on at recess. And on Thursday we're spreading positive messages throughout the school. So, Caleb, what have we been doing with air testing recently?
Yeah, so the 5th and 6th grade have all been working hard, writing essays, answering math and ELA questions on state testing. Everybody, as I said, have been working hard, and you can be granted rewards for doing so. We're all kind of glad that it's over. But continuing being over, the end of the year is coming up. So, Hank, what are we doing to finish off? What type of projects?
So some of the end of year projects that we're doing in 6th grade science are rebuilding roller coasters out of styrofoam tubes by learning the laws of force and motion. And in social studies, we are doing country scrapbooks where each individual picks a country and researches stuff about them. Brecken, what are we doing for the Tiger Trot this year?
Well, the Tiger Trot is a 5K that happens on Wednesday, May 3rd at 2:30 p.m. Right after school. It begins in the LIS parking lot, and it costs $2 to participate. Snacks and water are provided, and it's sponsored by the Loveland Runners Club.
That's all for today. Look out for next week's podcast and check out our Lovelanders podcast on Spotify.
I am George Jewell. I am a senior at Loveland High School, and here's the unofficial Loveland High School news update. With the end of the year quickly approaching, so is graduation day for the seniors at Loveland High School. Here are some fun things the seniors have planned for their final days at Loveland High School. Friday, May 5th is senior sunrise. Students will watch the sunrise at 6:15 a.m. up at the Tiger Turf and have donuts from Holtman's. May 5th is also decision day. The seniors will all wear college/future plan t-shirts or sweatshirts and take pictures in the gym during second bell. Thursday, May 11th, the seniors will dress in Hawaiian gear and have a luau. Friday, May 12th is the seniors' last day of class, and the theme is to dress your best. Wednesday, May 16th is graduation practice. All the seniors will come in for a portion of the day to practice for the ceremony on Saturday. Thursday, May 17th is the annual Senior Fun Day. The senior superlatives will be announced. The seniors will ride bikes through the halls of the school. There will be a cookout at lunch, and everyone's favorite, the slip and slide. They bring in a fire truck, and then we go down a slide. It's really cool. Lastly, May 20th is graduation day. Graduation will be held at the Census Center at 10 a.m. Congratulations and good luck to all of our seniors.
In Loveland City news, a small dog section was added at the Matt Haverkamp Foundation Dog Park this week. The dog park remains very popular among our residents, and now smaller dogs will have their own section, which includes access to the new water fountain. Loveland residents can now sign up for emergency notifications concerning Loveland. You can sign up for email or text notifications at lovelandoh.gov, and you get the option of alert categories to choose from. Another option is to sign up at alerthc.org. You must opt in to get these notifications. Looking ahead in Loveland, the Little Miami Chamber Alliance is pleased to announce the 10th annual Loveland Food Truck Rally to be held on Saturday, May 13th from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. at Shoppers Haven Plaza. And Saturday, May 13th, Love Our Land will have a native plant sale at Nisbet Park from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. For those of you that did the pre-order or plan on purchasing beforehand on the website, this will be your pickup time and place. Hope to see you there. We have something truly special here in Loveland. Have a great week, and thank you for listening.